Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Big West Mafia Show, part of College Football Mafia. Thank you so much to our subscribers and our channel members and everybody out there in chat. I see Ryan Willie, Timothy Green, we're here early. Hello, thank you so much again. I know Greg's got his show going on the other side, but I'm going to run my show on Mondays all the same, and I appreciate everyone being here. You can follow all of our shows from other contributors. The link's down here scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And be sure to check out our new College Football Mafia Discord channel. There's a lot of people. It's kind of where we're doing more of our main, back and forth chat. It just works a little more streamlined than Twitter. So I would absolutely recommend checking out our College Football Mafia Discord server. Hello to DP and Shonsky. I see you guys hopping in here. So unfortunately, Becky had something come up, and everything's fine. She's going to be all right, but flying solo today. So if you got more questions and comments in chat, we can do probably a little more time to do that as we go along today. But as we get going here, we will roll right into it. I'm just going to kick it off with some West Coast news. I know there's a lot of ACC stuff and everything. Got to save the good stuff for later. Got to slowly build as we go along the show. But hello again. I see Scott Schrader joining in. A Mighty Fit, of course, hit the like button. It really does help. Appreciate it. And Joaquin Morales, hello. Don't forget to smash that like button. It's free. Aha. We have returned. Apologies, I'm working with Wi-Fi as we go along here. But we'll touch on that, Scott, about the Nebraska and A&M thing. But first off, I saw this. I was really kind of shocked. Hines Ward, NFL legend. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up in chat and we can keep going. Can everyone hear me? But all right, we got a thumbs up from Joaquin. Sorry about that, guys. Hines Ward is going to be officially the wide receiver coach at ASU. That's a huge get for ASU. I've actually the thing that kind of struck me is that it's been this trend of, it seems like NFL legends rather than being, assistants or everything at the NFL level. Like Warren Sapp recently is going to work with Prime in Colorado. There's weird dynamic between what coaches go to the NFL and college. I mean, we all know it used to be, you start out in college, high school guy or your low end college, and you work your way up, and the NFL was the pinnacle. And it's so surprising to me, but it's cool in a way also, but surprising to see guys like that, NFL legends. They say, oh yeah, I'll kick it around in college. And I don't know if it's just because they don't care about the NIL stuff. We have yet to see really too many of them besides Dion take on, a head coaching role. But I really want to keep an eye on this as a trend that we're seeing, because it just feels like the dynamic of what types of coaches are in college versus NFL is really, really changing. But an outstanding get for the Sun Devils, to have a guy that high profile. And I have no doubt he has amazing, amazing things to help that staff with. Just want to say hello again, Big Lubbock. I see you popping in here. Yeah, Hines Ward, a great hire from Scott Schrader. Absolutely. And yeah, you see a lot of it. I mean, going to put my Husky hat on for a second, but you get Jed Fish and he's bringing in, Belichick and Carroll, and they had Jack Del Rio over the weekend stopping by practice. And it wasn't as a scout because Jack Del Rio is not a head coach in the NFL anymore, but it just feels like they're trying to flex their NFL muscles. And it used to be, Alabama was always the famous one of saying, 5-star to first round, you come in, we'll get you straight to the NFL. And I think that multiple places, Colorado, ASU, Washington, they're really trying to stress that point in the NIL world. You got to show these guys that they're going to make big time money at the next level by committing to your program. And keeping in form with wearing my Husky hat a little bit, I gotta talk about this one. So bear with me. Husky Homer hat going back on. This is 4-star wide receiver Raiden Vines Bright, and commits to Washington. It's a big time guy, 4-star guy. And normally it wouldn't be huge news, but he chose Washington over like USC, Alabama, Notre Dame. He had the usual suspects of top end recruits. And it's surprising to me because this is the type of guy that Washington was not getting under Kalen DeBoer. He was notorious for not recruiting high school. And the fact that this kid chose Jed Fish and Washington over DeBoer in Alabama, I think it's just a huge shift that the Huskies may have a down year going into the Big Ten, but there's a totally different philosophy from Fish versus DeBoer. And especially after Alabama spring game, it's on ESPN. It gets all the hype and the fanfare and everything. But I'm really, really curious to see how the first season pans out for both. And there's high expectations at Alabama, and I see a lot of people not really picking the Huskies, and I don't blame you, right? So many starters gone to the NFL, and it's totally understandable that you're going into a brand new, very difficult conference. You're going to see a drop off, but don't sleep on the Huskies. I think they could actually surprise some people. Not challenging for the conference. That's not what I'm saying here, but even trying to not quite wear my Husky Homer hat so tightly, I think that the Huskies could do decently well next year. Please send him down to Nebraska. We'll do on that one. We'll get to the A&M in Nebraska. I know that was kind of my tease coming into the show. Oh goodness, I forgot I added this in at the last minute to. Sorry to all my BYU friends out there, and we got Mark Pope is headed to Kentucky, famously on their national championship team, and they get all the fanfare and everything of him coming in. But this one, to me, why this bothered me, I'm not a BYU fan or anything, but even just for my friend Bomber, if I was a BYU fan and I see him do this in my gym and he takes the job, taking the job is one thing, great opportunity. It's Kentucky. You can't really be mad at him. But to do this in your home gym, I think is so disrespectful and tone deaf. And I get it's a business and everything, but this is just, he needed to do better. You got to treat your fans on the way out a certain way. And I think it's definitely not stripping down to your, old Kentucky uniform and hooting and hollering, but it is what it is. BYU had an excellent season last year. I think they can really rebound. Not an epic hoops guy. Don't know any replacement names, but the hoops carousel has almost been as entertaining as the football was at the end of the season. DP here. Husky loss of a head coach is a problem for the Huskies. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem for everyone because in the new world, it opens a floodgate into the portal. And even Alabama, Caleb Downs goes to Ohio State. That's a guy Alabama has no business losing. So you're absolutely right there. Yeah, DP again. That's just wrong. If I was Kentucky, I'd fire him. No joke. He's a legend there, national championship team guy. And, he had success at BYU. It was funny to see a lot of the, acted like an oxymoron. Chomsky, I can only imagine, I can't speak for you, but I would say, after the great season he had, you probably, if someone just said he's going to Kentucky and he took the job and they're going to pay him a lot and everything, you're like, I understand, right? He's an alumni, makes sense. But to do this is just totally not cool. And, we always talk about, money rules all, but this isn't anything to do with money. This is just him kind of goofing off and being ridiculous. So I would at least expect the outgoing coach to treat the previous fan base with a little more respect than this. We got 25 people here in chat. Hello. Unless Greg's show got over, I don't know, but I appreciate everyone for being here. And, we're kind of ripping right through it. No Becky today. I possibly maybe have a special guest later on, depending. One of our other show contributors may drop by. But in the meantime, we're rolling through chat. If you have any questions, comments, super chats are always appreciated, of course. They really do help out, but I will absolutely try and get through as many comments and chat as we can today. Just wanted to drop this real quick. Big Ten Network, they're going to hype up all your guys, but This is Rob Rang, Fox Draft Analyst, and you're seeing as many, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well over 10 projected first round picks out of the Big Ten. And, limited number of teams, but it's just the talent was so top heavy this year. And obviously Oregon and Washington were in the conference, but it's both good and bad, right? It shows that the teams coming in had a lot of depth, played at a really high level, but you got to reload all those guys in the portal era. And Oregon's expected to do well. Ohio State's expected to do well, but can a Penn State keep up? Can a Washington keep up in this new world where the big guys are getting big money? We will see, but I'm as you can tell, I'm very anxious about this next Big Ten season. I think it's going to be a season unlike any other, both for Big Ten, SEC fans, and even Big 12 fans. The first time you're ever going to remember not playing Oklahoma or Texas. Those were always staple programs in that conference, and something cool and new can come from that. But when you think of certain conferences, you just picture certain brands in your mind. Big Ten, you got Michigan, Ohio State. They're just always there. Pac-10, Pac-12, you had previously your USC was always the big one. Some maybe Washington and Oregon to a lesser extent, but always USC was the face of the conference. And to see schools like that not in their conferences, it's kind of a weird situation to be in. And I think for me, it's a little sad. It's exciting, but it's I'm living in a world where I'm finally coming to the realization the Pac-12 is not going to be around anymore. The conference I've had my whole life. So we will move forward, but it is a little bit difficult. I'm not going to promise to give you top-notch analysis, but we saw the FSU news this week that ACC to me is completely backed into a corner. I know there were kind of variances between the North Carolina and Florida cases. Our friend Doug Rohan, and there's also a video posted in our normal section video. Members can see it, and I believe it's going live soon. You have to double check me on that. But Doug Rohan does an excellent breakdown of the two cases, how they differ, the North Carolina court versus the Florida court. But in both cases, just my opinion, ACC is completely backed into a corner. They have no good options out of this because either they're going to drag themselves through a trial, it's going to cost money, it's going to cost time, and it's going to drudge up a bunch of stuff they do not want known, especially ESPN. And I know that redacted portion, ESPN does not want the full details of their contracts known. And there's debate whether legally, they're allowed to see that or not. But beyond all of that, FSU will just ride this thing into the ground because if they're already stuck in the conference, so it's almost they have nothing to lose, and they have enough money that if there is a price put on the table, they can buy their way out. The crazy thing for me is the ACC is facing what the Pac-12 was in a different way. They still have a TV contract. They still have, some legally binding agreements. The Pac-12 didn't have that. They were end of contract. Two teams had already agreed to leave, and they were kind of grasping at straws. But the ACC is really on the verge of a team being so fed up. They're like, I don't care how much money it takes, how much time, or how difficult it is. I am buying my way out. Screw you guys. I'm going home. I'm going to go play with the cool kids. And they're just ready to go. The best option for me is the ACC to settle, but you have to thread that needle where it costs Florida State, the price comes down from their, $500 million, whatever it is, that Florida State says this is acceptable. We will pay you this money, and they can disperse it to the remaining members. But if you let that bar as the ACC come too low, it is a floodgate. Everyone is gone because I don't care how much you offer them out of, the buyouts to get out of the conference. That's short-term money. That's not long-term money. And this is all hinging on that 2027. Because I hate to say it, I've seen a couple of Pitt fans, most of the other fan bases, there's a couple people here and there, but I've seen multiple Pitt fans this week telling me the ACC without Clemson and Florida State is better than the current Big 12. And that's not even the argument. That's neither here nor there if they're better than the Big 12. It's you are only worth what someone is willing to pay you. And ESPN will not be willing to pay you more than what you currently make losing your two biggest brands. You will get a very low number. The Pac-12 got a 20 mil low ball. They originally had 30 million on the table before the Big 12 took that deal. The Pac-12, they screwed themselves. But I don't think some ACC fans realize what kind of a hole they're in, because the value is concentrated at the top, and that's true with all these conferences. Michigan and Ohio State bring crazy value, and we know that the other schools, there's some at the bottom that don't, but they all need each other, so it evens out. So that's what I'm urging you, ACC fans. If you are not in one of these schools that's regularly talked about as finding another home, brace yourself. It will be a rough ride. I wish the best for you. I truly do. But it will not be this sunny sailing and, they'll walk off and we'll be okay. It'll be just fine. Things are definitely about to change. We thought the last round of realignment was crazy. This next one, I feel like, is definitely going to match. Expedition Greg, we will touch on this. I will get to that. I found this extremely interesting for all of our chit chat about whether AAU matters or not. We're suddenly getting a little bit of indication that the Nebraska folks and even the Big Ten folks think it definitely is. Yeah, Noel Ramirez. I believe I see a UCF hat under there. Not a fan of ACC team, just like the chaos of teams not getting what they want. Yeah, and especially rivals. I mean, if you have nearby proximity, other Florida teams, I know it's probably tough to see Florida State. Maybe, you want to see them all kind of burn in a sense, but it's like me. I both enjoy and don't enjoy Washington State's predicament, because they're a rival, and that doesn't mean I want to see their program collapse. That's your rivals are the most fun to beat when they're really good. Ask me how I know about Oregon playing Washington last year. The wins are more worthwhile when they're very good, you're very good, and you still beat them. Our good friend Wild Ute, hey ACC, listen to the sergeant. You're only worth what someone's willing to pay. It's just the truth. Apologies, you will hear my two newborns in the background. My dear wife is doing her absolute best. She allows me to do this show on Mondays, and thank you so much to her. So just bear with me on the noise in the background. It's part of the ambiance of the set here at the Pickles household. But yeah, I had this discussion with Wild Ute about values, because we always argue, you should get this much money, that much money. If they don't offer it, it doesn't matter what you're worth on paper. It matters what that offer is that they slide across the table. Yeah, Almighty Finn saying, don't worry, FSU is going to get where they want. They will. Though, and I'm firmly convinced it's the Big Ten. I think there's still a lot of bad feelings about the SEC and ESPN, not only leaving them out of the playoff, but I mean, think about all the times that they could have joined the SEC anyway, and they were absolutely worthy of doing so. And this isn't a knock against Missouri, but FSU's had interest in joining the SEC for a long time. They'd make perfect sense. But you always had the Gators, and it felt like primarily Florida trying to put their thumb on the scale and say that we don't need FSU. We run Florida. We run this market. But that come hell or high water, they're going to buy their way out. And I'd be happy to play them in the Big Ten. I know travel is going to be horrible. Travel is going to be a nightmare for everyone. Some clever scheduling and a lot of money, you can mitigate some of that stuff. But, I think you definitely have at least one conference that, two open arms. And I bet you there's even an offer in writing somewhere that they've slowly leaked through back channels FSU's way about what value they think they would bring to the conference. ACC is an embarrassment. Scrap and Wolf, I'm not sure, fan, what team you're a fan of, if it's an ACC team or not. I think I wouldn't use the word embarrassing. I'd say the word it's a shame, because ACC is a proud conference. They came from the ashes of the Big East in a way, the modern ACC as it is today. There's a lot of good football. There's a lot of good brands, and I don't love seeing conferences disappear. That's not what I'm about. Even when the Pac-12 was fine, I didn't like seeing the Big East go away. And I think it just shows the value of good leadership and the value of poor leadership. Again, I've had the debate with ACC fans of who's more terrible, Jim Phillips or the artist formerly known as Larry Scott. And being biased, I'll put Larry Scott up there 100 times out of 100 for worst commissioner ever. I know Kliavkov takes the final nail in the coffin, but the whole death of the Pac-12 was orchestrated by Larry Scott. And Jim Phillips has overseen this steady decline, or really just stagnation, because they signed a deal at the time that looked great, and just over time it's just not kept up. Money for sports has skyrocketed, and that might not happen forever, but the ACC financially is just not competitive in a world where finances are now more important than ever. And Jim Phillips has to eat the blame, but truthfully, you need to look at the presidents of these universities, because they're the ones who gave Phillips the okay. They sign his paychecks. They could fire him at almost any time if they all collectively agreed to. So the buck ultimately stops with them. And fans of ACC teams, if you're frustrated with the situation and you feel like you're pretty powerless, start calling them out. Don't just blame the commissioner. Commissioner obviously has some responsibility to do the best for his conference, and Phillips has fell short. Look at your presidents, see who they are, see if they've changed, see if you have the same president that signed that deal, because they're the ones that ultimately decide the fate for your schools and your sports teams. DP, Clemson fan, just wish the ACC didn't screw their members. That appears like they have. It'd be nice to part ways peacefully without needing Vaseline. I'll leave out the last part, but to leave peacefully. I mean, that's the best solution for everyone. Don't drag your dirty laundry out. Come to a settlement. And like I said, the ACC's got to thread the needle where Clemson and FSU can get their money and go their separate ways because they're financially able to. But if that bar is too low, you're going to see UNC. To me, is the tipping point. UNC is the figurative Washington and Oregon of the ACC, in that FSU and Clemson are your USC, UCLA. It's still, in theory, a whole unit after they go. But if UNC is out, then it breaks. There might be some remnants left behind, but it'll be nothing like it was before. And I don't care how many Stanfords or Cals or SMUs you have. You can't put it whole back together again. You can't cobble enough value to restore or maintain what you had. And then the decision for ESPN becomes ridiculously easy. I got people touching on the WNBA draft. I did see Caitlin Clark is going to Indiana. Congrats to Caitlin. I don't know where the Seattle Storm are picking. I haven't seen, but to my WNBA fans out there, I'm hoping that I hope the popularity from the tournament carries over into the WNBA. I know they are woefully underpaid, and I understand there's reasons, like compared to their male counterparts, where the pay isn't there, but even compared to college NIL now, the WNBA needs to get it together, because if it is more profitable for a person to stay in college and get endorsements and things, and the WNBA can't be competitive, that's a losing situation. You really, really got to find a way to remedy that. Almighty Finn, FSU and Clemson are on a higher level than USC and UCLA. Debatable, neither here nor there. What I'm just saying in terms of impact to the conference by them leaving, where in theory the ACC still exists and could carry on with the members that would be left if they lost just FSU and Clemson. Just like the Pac-12 had a deal on the table post USC UCLA. It was significantly less than they thought they were going to get. And I expect the same in the ACC. There's going to be a deal on the table, if there is one, post FSU and Clemson, and it's going to look rather ugly to ACC fans. ESPN will not pick up the option, even under the current value, with those two brands leaving. That was one more thing I wanted to touch on. I saw that note of ESPN trying to backdoor their way into, we'll let you into the SEC, FSU and Clemson, or these other two schools, but only basically if you agree to, like, more or less not break the rest of the conference, not break it. And I don't quite understand this. I don't get the legal ramifications. Moen has talked about it before, about why it's illegal. Basically, it's some kind of market fixing where, we'll take the really good programs and they're all in ESPN's entity, so we'll just move them to where we want them and leave all the other ones behind, and that nobody else gets to interfere with this process. So ESPN gets what they want both ways. I don't know why, but it made sense to me when he explained it that it was super, super, super illegal. And because if they're just locking out the other networks or the Big Ten, these aren't, we're talking more or less franchises in like the NFL that you can just move around where you want rather than independent universities with boards of governors and independent conferences. The Super League is exciting only in the literal sense of, oh, we get all these great matchups. But then you think about what it also means, that the death of conferences and the total, we've already seen history and tradition take a massive hit with the way conferences are aligned now. But you can just kiss it completely goodbye if we go to a true Super League. Excuse me, everybody. Our good friend Shonsky, BYU Cougar. Question: I'm hearing Florida State is going to be really good this year if they win a national championship. Is that going to hurt them in their lawsuit against the ACC? I would say no, only because I don't think that's actually more money to the that's actually, I think, a feather in FSU's cap, because their argument is that they are not being paid value and that they are actually contributing to a conference that doesn't return value for them. They would be better off in another conference. So Florida State winning a national championship and collecting all the additional money that goes with the CFP, that would be them saying, look, we brought in as much CFP money as our conference is paying us out from our TV deal. Like, this is garbage. So it really, I don't think it necessarily hurts the case one way or the other. If anything, I think it's something they could say, look, we are putting the work in. We're a great team and we won the national championship and still made less money than Rutgers or Indiana or, whoever. We made less money than these teams despite winning it all. I think that would be a very strong argument for them. Kilani, yep, WNBA, you're only worth what someone's willing to pay. Same thing. Yeah, that's a very, very fair point. I don't think they're not trying to just shortchange the athletes. But that's what I'm saying. They have an opportunity. Hopefully, the women's national championship had these star players and big names, and they drew better viewership than the men. That's real money. Like eyeballs on TVs or streaming devices or whatever, that's real money. And if the WNBA can even capture a fraction of that, you're going to see player salaries go up. You're going to see quality of play go up. And if they can, fast forward that sustained success over a period of time, you might see additional franchises. The growth of the women's game doesn't have to come at the expense of anything else. And I've always found it kind of interesting that obviously pro teams rely on college for the majority of their talent in the major sports, and to not maybe more have a cross promotional, I guess, if you want to call it. We see the NBA just trying to poach all the top talent. They have the 1-year rule. And truthfully, I don't think there should be any limitation. If you have a kid that wants to go straight out of high school, then just let him go, because I would rather see college full of guys that want to stay 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years if you redshirt. We used to remember teams from back in the day, my casual watching of basketball and even football, where you'd have the same dudes for multiple years. They were stars. You never even heard of a freshman's name because you never saw them play. And I get if they're exceptional and they're freshmen, they should play, but you really grew to love these players because you saw them year after year. For us, it was like we only had Michael Penix of Washington for 2 years. But after that first season, we said, oh, we're returning all these guys. I know all their names. We're so hyped for the season. Like, you don't get that anymore. And I think it's something that they could really, really, really try and emphasize, especially college basketball. In the women's game, you see it more so because they're not necessarily going to the WNBA right away. So you get 4-year starters like Clark who are just excellent, and they get that household name recognition. Almighty Finn, do you remember Beano O'Brien at Washington in 91? Little bit of an admission, a little bit before my time. I know Beano O'Brien is legend at Washington. But yeah, unfortunately, I do not remember the 91 national championship team. I will definitely admit to that. I do remember the 2001 Rose Bowl team. That was kind of my first memory of a huge Husky game that was a big deal and everyone winning. So a little bit before my time, but I think the Washington does a pretty good job of talking about their previous legends and bringing some of them back. And Jed Fish has said he definitely wants to emphasize bringing back some of those legendary players. Does FSU have a chance to make it to the SEC, or are they stuck going to the Big Ten? I don't think they're necessarily stuck. I mean, you make it sound like they have to go to the Big Ten, whereas we'd like to have you. I get, again, travel not ideal, not your traditional rivals, but give it a chance. That's kind of my take. In my biased way, as someone going into the Big Ten, there's certainly a chance that they go to the SEC, because part of that is, when we've talked about, everyone just does the mental math of allocating teams. Oh, the SEC is going to take these and the Big Ten is going to take these, and which ones do they take? Which ones make sense? And it's a pretty short list of, 6 or 7 teams for those two conferences. And part of the math you have to do is like, Florida State is not as valuable to the SEC as they are to the Big Ten, because the SEC already has a Florida market. And that doesn't mean FSU is not valuable. They're extremely valuable to both. But the SEC taking Florida State, to me, is more so about denying them in the Big Ten. And that's kind of like with North Carolina, or people have even said Virginia to the SEC. They're not good in football as of recently. They're known as a basketball school more so. But they have value because your biggest rival wants them. So it's not only the value you gain, it's what you take away as an opportunity from the other team. So there is a chance they get into the SEC. Honestly, with their board of governors, like, if there's the money and the political will, if SMU can buy their way into the ACC, then anything is possible. And Florida State will have options. I just, personally, to me, I think they make good sense in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten would go out of their way to get them a travel partner, a Miami, a Georgia Tech, depending on who fits, the requirements the best and who the Big Ten president's like. But yeah, the SEC is not off the table. Don't get it twisted that way. Shonsky, biggest argument with the ACC is the lack of TV revenue holding them back from competing. It was certainly a talking point, and it's impossible to say, because you're trying to make the hypothetical argument. Oh, if we weren't in the ACC, if we had $20 million a year instead of being 5th and left out of the playoff, we would have gotten that extra kid in NIL. We would have had better facilities, had better recruiting, paid more coaches. You're just arguing the hypothetical you can never prove, right? You're saying, oh, for sure, if we had more money, we would do better. But that isn't always true, because Texas A&M has more money than God, and they don't do better. They do worse. Miami, no offense, had tons and tons and tons of money pumped into their program. They don't necessarily do better. So it's not a one-to-one correlation of money to success. Obviously, over time, the more money you have, the better you tend to do. But I think it's an argument they can make without necessarily having to prove it, if that makes sense. But the argument, the strong argument is saying, all of that, like, look at these teams that do far worse than us and get paid more, I think is the stronger argument. And you're going to have that no matter what the conference. But, it used to be a pretty level playing field between all the Power 5 conferences, where you didn't see these monstrous gaps. And it's just been so much more emphasized the last few years. What's the ACC worth without FSU and Clemson? Just my opinion, just Sergeant Pickles, who's bad at math. Terrible at math, but just, kind of counting the cards here. Pick the strongest G5 and the Big 12, and you're kind of somewhere in there. And again, it's not that, on paper, their value should be, comparable to a Big 12, depending on who's left, etc. Or if the Big 12 takes teams, then it changes, obviously. But I don't think the TV networks are necessarily having to fill a ton of inventory. And if there's only one bidder for the ACC, you're kind of stuck in a terrible place. That's where the $20 million Amazon offer, Apple offer that the Pac-12 got, I could definitely see a reduced ACC getting an offer like that. And it's tough. It is really tough, but, I don't think they're going to be able to, they're certainly not going to exceed where they are now. And I think it'll be very, very difficult to almost impossible for them to maintain their current payouts if they lose those teams. Timothy Green, always enjoy the content. Best of luck. I think it's doing great. Really appreciate it, Timothy Green. It's our Mountaineer friend. Yeah, riding solo here today. We're kind of getting our footing as the Monday show. It's a little tough going up against the Godfather, Greg Flugar, but I just want to stay consistent and know that every Monday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, you guys can find us here on the Big West Mafia Show. And if you'd like to subscribe, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, throw comments in there. I try to respond to as many as I can. I love chatting with everyone out there. Keep it cordial and respectful. But if you'd also like to support us by becoming a member, we have access to exclusive member videos, like our good friend Wild Ute just recently did Louisville to the Big 12. And it was a very, very excellent breakdown. He had a hotly contested debate with our good friend Coos over at Coos's Corner about whether Notre Dame would stay independent. And Wild Ute has another string of videos. I believe Pitt to the Big 12 is coming up. And Virginia Tech at some point, or Virginia, has he already done Virginia Tech? I don't know. Ute is cranking out these videos so fast, I can't make heads or tails of which ones he's done already, but he's just continuing right along and gives you just an as unbiased as possible apples to apples breakdown of where he thinks the value is. And those videos are available to our members, help support the channel. And if you'd like to become a member, this is how you can do so.
Want to become a member of the College Football Mafia family? Simply select the Join button from our homepage. There are several options with their own unique benefits to choose from. You can also set yourself to auto-accept gifted membership by selecting the gift settings options as shown.
Alrighty. Yeah, and thank you again to our members. I see a few of you here in the chat, like Scott Schrader, Almighty Finn, Shonsky, Timothy Green. If you have not checked out those member videos, go right on over after the show and please do so. And we will get to a few more of your comments, and then we'll get to the coup de grace, because I feel like we'll have a lot of debate about my proposal for Nebraska and A&M. So just real quick, yeah, women need to stay in college before they go to the NBA. It's tough because, on the one hand, do you want them, if they're good enough, should they play? Should they go? It's the old debate with the one and dones in men's basketball. If they're really truly a one and done, shouldn't they just go straight to the NBA? And in some cases, they make good enough money in the G League that actually plays pretty well. Being a West Virginia fan, travel and no rivalries is a pain in the butt. Patrick, I feel you there. I've been pushing just for my West Virginia friends to get Virginia Tech and Pitt. Pitt will come kicking and screaming, but that almost makes it better for you guys in the backyard brawl. But Virginia Tech, Pitt, and Louisville to the Big 12 is like a reward for my West Virginia friends out there for a decade plus of terrible travel. I think you guys deserve it. You're a passionate fan base, a great fan base, and you got to care about someone to hate them. And, the backyard brawl has a lot of hate going both ways. So I think that would be awesome to see as a featured conference game. Almighty Finn, looks like an FSU fan down there. People say Clemson has value to the SEC, but doesn't the SEC already have South Carolina in that market? As an FSU fan, I'd rather go to the SEC in the Big Ten. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, if your big rival's Florida and you're playing the other Southern teams, I don't begrudge any FSU fan saying, I'd rather go to the SEC than the Big Ten. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It does hurt my feelings a little when you say the Big Ten's crap and the SEC is great, so that's why I want to go. But, teach their own on that one. It makes sense with the rivalries and travel why you'd want to stay Southern. There's definitely overlap with South Carolina and Clemson. Clemson has actually put up the better TV numbers even in the conference that they're currently in. They get more national games as one of the big brands in the ACC, but even accounting for that, they do better in the bigger markets like in Charlotte and I believe also Atlanta. They're obviously not the biggest team there. North Carolina, I believe, is the biggest in Charlotte, and Georgia is by far the biggest in Atlanta. However, according to Wild Ute, and he can either back me up or refute me here in the chat if he's still here, that Clemson was the second most viewed in both of those markets because of their proximity to both cities. So there's value there. The SEC already doubles down in certain markets, and I don't think it's a huge problem. But I see your point. Like, for example, they didn't add Oklahoma State. They did double down in Texas, but Texas is massive with a bunch of people. But like not taking an Oklahoma State to double down in Oklahoma, it's back and forth, kind of tit for tat, what value they see. And if the overlap in the rivalry game, for sure, you have to factor in as its own thing. Shonsky wasn't arguing. I thought you left that part out. Oh, no worries. No worries at all. We're just out here talking ball. I don't take it personally at all, even if you call me an idiot. I've been called much worse in life, I promise you. Skaven, yes. Another channel member. Hello, Husky Pickle. Hello, my friend. How are we doing out there, wherever you are in the world this evening? Mighty Finn, don't think the Big Ten is crap. Just don't want to play IU, Purdue, Minnesota, Northwestern. Yeah, I understand. You get to play Vanderbilt and Missouri, who typically isn't very good, and Mississippi State. And if that list appeals to you more than IU, Purdue, Minnesota, Northwestern, to each their own. That's absolutely fair. And, that immediately those were the jokes we get from Coug fans or other Pac-12 fans, like, oh, you want to go play Rutgers? You want to go play Northwestern? You'd rather play them than us? And it's like, yeah, but you're kind of leaving out the part where you get to say, I get to go play Ohio State. I get to go play Michigan. I get to go play Wisconsin. I get to go play Penn State. I still get to play USC. I still get to play Oregon. It's a better list, top to bottom. There's always pros and cons. Skaven, yes. Illinois and working, so I'm just listening tonight. No worries, boss. I hope I keep you entertained and that you can get through your work night. I've been there before on the late shift. All righty, we will swing right over to our coup de grace, which has set some scuttlebutt. People disagreeing with me greatly over what I believe is possible. And our first map here is, what if Nebraska, because they're so concerned about AAU, and the Big Ten clearly values it, although I don't know if it's a 100% requirement. Does Nebraska use this as a scapegoat to get into a different conference? And what other conference, you might ask? Well, there's only one other conference that truly makes sense for them, because they, no offense to the Big 12, but I don't see them returning home when they're currently in the Big 10. So there's really only one candidate left. And I've heard scuttlebutt that, is this a ploy? Is this something they're use to get where they really want to go? And that would be the SEC. Does the SEC want Nebraska? I don't know. They certainly fit in with, I'm sure they'd love to play Missouri and Oklahoma and Texas again. Nebraska fans, if you're out there in chat, are you sacrificing Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin for Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas? Is that something you want? Old school fans might want to. And I included in here just for the purposes of argument, because I do think, in the end, Sergeant Pickle's world, that Clemson and North Carolina will end up in the SEC. That's just as I see it today. And Scott Schrader, absolutely. You can tell me it's nonsense. This is not a world I expect to come true whatsoever. The North Carolina and Clemson part, I do believe is real, but this is just me throwing it out there, because the counterpart to this lovely, lovely chart that I've made is, where does A&M go? You notice them conspicuously missing on the previous map. Now, Paul Feinbaum, if you listen to his show, I got quite a kick out of it, because Paul Feinbaum is just the hot take wizard down there shilling for the SEC. He does his job well, and I'm sure Greg Sankey sends him a Christmas card every year. However, he mentioned that, A&M is still furious that Texas got let in, because the whole reason A&M left the Big 12 was the Longhorn Network. And at some point, I'm going to put the time in to do a full dedicated video about the Longhorn Network and how it shaped college football today, because it almost led, the four teams from the Big 12 were going to the Pac-12 until Texas put their foot down and said they demanded the Longhorn Network. So the Pac-12 said no. It led to A&M leaving. It led to Nebraska leaving. It led to Missouri leaving. And it basically created a situation in the Big 12 where Texas wanted to be Lord King of all and scrape in all the money. And it's quite interesting how much they wanted to keep it. And I believe that A&M is still fairly salty about it. They probably love being in the SEC. It's big time money. But do we live in a world where they hate the Longhorns so much that they would accept an invite to the Big Ten? They actually fit in great in the Big Ten, academically, football-wise. They're excellent academic school. They're AAU. And as you can see on my map, that my two immediate choices for the Big Ten are FSU and Miami. I think having those 3 Southern schools to kind of balance out. You do some clever scheduling. I think you could make it work. Now, I do not think this happens. I do not think Nebraska leaves. I do not think A&M comes, at least nowhere near in the future. Not to sell out my good friend Moen, but he is on the Texas A&M to the Big Ten train, but only in a future where both are going to 20 or 24 teams. He thinks that's like way down the road possible. But we kind of see the seeds of it now, where the discontent at A&M is still there. And it was a huge stipulation of them joining the SEC. You do not bring Texas. We do not want Texas. We want to be the SEC team in Texas. Yeah, Scott Schrader. That's why Nebraska left. The Longhorn Network is like the jet. I mean, it's Texas in their actions, but the Longhorn Network was definitely part of it. Illini said this is very far-fetched swap of teams because the Big and the SEC, it would make sense for Kansas to join the SEC. I think it would make sense in a future world, and I've actually seen a lot of, let me throw this back up there real quick. I've seen a lot of SEC fans saying, why on earth do we want Kansas? They're no good at football. They're no good at football. It's like you took Missouri, who arguably at the time was worse off or on par with Kansas. But, people don't like to say academics, but academics, that's worth some money. Basketball, Kansas, basketball. They're bringing that value every year. And it's something the SEC has tried to build. They've had good seasons in basketball, but traditionally they weren't necessarily known as like the power basketball conference. And the Big 12 recently has just stepped up their game. I'll get to you in a second, Connor. Hello to my B friend. I just saw him pop up there chat. Yeah, so Kansas would make sense. I think there's going to be a duel over Kansas in the future because I don't think expansion's done. There's not some magic number they're going to get to and be happy. It's all about they're going to do the math and can your addition pay for, basically your cut of the pie. And it's easier to do in a TV contract year because the number is going to go up anyway. So adding that team, you're not just necessarily adding their share in. Like Oregon and Washington got half share because they don't necessarily bring $70 million a year. But guess what? The majority of the Big Ten doesn't. It's just that Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, USC bring in so much value that when it's dispersed amongst the others, it equals like $70 million a year, right? So I think the next round of additions, which is kind of that 2030 time frame, school like Kansas may be the next battleground between the Big Ten and the SEC for sure. Connor Johnson, 7-hour flight from Miami to Seattle. Not saying, just saying. Someone pointed out, and there was actually an interview with a USC football player a while back, that once you're on the plane, you're on the plane. It really doesn't matter. That's why for, college football players are obviously chartering a lot of flights, but flying to, from USC to Stanford was more or less the same as flying from USC to Washington. It made no difference to them. However, the time zone difference does matter. So you have to adjust for that. And that's where I think the creative scheduling, etc. Washington, Oregon, and USC, UCLA, they accepted those risks. And I think having the block of 4, that's why on this particular map that I made, it made sense to me that you add A&M understanding that you have a Florida State or a Miami or a Georgia Tech or another fair, Southern school, at least in the region, to play off of or play more frequently to reduce that travel. So we're in the world where, travel distance doesn't matter as long as the money's there. And, the SEC is focused on being a regional conference. I don't think necessarily to mitigate travel costs, but they have the luxury of keeping it all kind of in-house, as it were. Scott Schrader, so Trev Alberts left Nebraska to A&M, then the Aggies to the Big, makes all sense now. I know, 4D chess moves. They're just swapping stuff. And Troy Dannon left from Washington to Nebraska because he doesn't want to be in the Big Ten. He's going to take them Huskers straight to the SEC, I tell you what. Big Lubbock, Longhorn Network really was an ESPN play to keep Texas from going to the Pac, being a Fox property. Yeah, it felt that way at the time as a Pac-12 fan. ESPN threw $15 million a year just to stay in the Big 12. It is kind of crazy. Like, Texas is a huge brand in the college football world. Like, there's no denying it. But how did they get away with being like put on this crazy pedestal where like a network like ESPN is just bowing to them hand over foot? And it hasn't worked. Like the Longhorn Network, I believe, is being shut down. It's just not profitable because you have a network completely dedicated to one team. Like, it never made sense to me. And some of these conference networks work, like the Big Ten network, from everything I've seen, is good. The SEC network is good. The ACC network has been, good. It seems like they do good coverage. The Pac-12 network, the only reason it was crap is because of the distribution. The actual content production, ask any Pac fan, ask Connor Johnson, the actual production value on the Pac-12 network was really, really good. High quality, great guests, good analysis. You could watch any game you wanted. It just, if nobody sees it, again, like if nobody offers you money, then you can't accept it. If you're only worth what someone's willing to pay you, if no one can see you, then is your programming really good? I guess we'll never know. Almighty Finn, love the Big Ten on basketball. Yeah, it's been kind of a down year, it seems. I was keeping an eye on Purdue, obviously. But that it seems like that's the traditional method. If you're not good in football, you better bring value in basketball. Looking at you, UCLA and Illinois and Indiana and Purdue. But Florida State, I know, has had proud seasons of both. It's the rare team that can really stay at a high level in both football and basketball and bring that value. But, so if basketball is something you're really into, the Big Ten Conference is certainly a good option. Connor Johnson, football will be fine, but baseball, that's wild, a full day of travel. Yeah, if you don't know, the Beavs are all about their baseball and making it work. But the Beavs are playing, you're flying down and playing multiple games at an opponent. I mean, just from the Beavs playing, they'll fly down and play a set against USC, a set against UCLA, and fly home. That's only one trip, and they're making all their games count. Other sports, I forget the exact ones where they're only playing 1 or 2 matches a week, like basketball more so, but I believe like softball and some of the other ones where they're not necessarily, like softball, they're playing a couple games at a time. But certain sports I know is going to be more difficult than others. And my long-term prediction, even in the Big Ten and SEC, especially for sports that maybe not all the members participate in, like crew rowing, men's and women's, is big on the West Coast. Those sports will probably stay in regional aligned conferences. They won't be member sports for their own universities. I think you'll see some of the Olympic style sports return to regional affiliations, all the California schools, San Diego, Cal Poly, whatever. They're all going to play beach volleyball against USC and UCLA, because I don't think they're playing beach volleyball in Minnesota last time I checked. So that you could definitely save on travel that way. Illini said, in most sports, the Big will, I can't read that. The Big will about have to make weekend trips, play 2 games in the same area, similar to old Pac scheduling. Yeah, absolutely. It seems a lot easier to do, fly into the heart of Big Ten land. You can knock out games against multiple opponents. And it made sense why they paired. The LA schools are right there together. LA is a massive airport. You're not going to have any travel. And other than the fact that Eugene is kind of in the middle of nowhere, I've heard rumors that Phil Knight is committing some money to try and upgrade the Eugene airport. Because if people don't know, out in the West Coast, Eugene is like an hour and a half drive south of Portland, which is your nearby biggest airport. Eugene is not a big town. It's a college town. Washington is obviously right in Seattle, so travel there. But, you'll pair those schools together. You'll play at Washington, you'll play at Oregon, you go home. But like I said, those time zones, that can be a butt kicker. So some clever scheduling. And I think what they should do with all this extra money they found, get a charter plane, throw your golf team, your basketball team, and your softball team. They all get on together. They all fly off and play the same schools and come home. I don't know why that isn't possible, but if it is, they should absolutely look into it. I'm just a dude sitting in a room, though. What do I know? They're a $1 billion conference. Almighty Finn, what about the travel for non-revenue sports in the Big Ten? How will that affect the bottom line? Yeah, and that's kind of what I touched on. That's why Washington and Oregon, they were basically allowed to borrow $10 million a year in the upcoming seasons against their future earnings to account for the travel increase. And they're getting half shares right now. When they're getting full shares, it'll be a non-issue. And that's kind of how the math works out, is that the Pac-12 deal was so bad at a certain point that even with the increased travel, they're going to make net positive more money. There's been scuttlebutt about, does your recruiting take a hit? Do players not want to travel across country, all year to play, whatever Olympic sports where they're not necessarily generating revenue, and they're going to be students? Like, the majority of these athletes are full-time students and will have full-time careers not in their professional sport. So they have to look at it like, this is a positive for me. It's a great thing in my life to play college sports. I love it, but it's not a long-term career goal outside of possibly in like an Olympic team. They're going to get degrees and go on to real careers. Do I want to fly across the country to play softball, 24 times in a 2-month span? It's tough. That's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. Almighty Finn, some kind words. Love your show. Yeah, I really appreciate it. We've had 40 some odd people here in chat. Just listen to me flap my gums at everyone for a while. If you have any, I'm kind of doing a wrap up here right at the hour mark as my daughter is crying there in the background. Apologies. But if you have any last minute questions, comments, or you could even see mean things to me, it doesn't hurt my feelings at all. I promise you, my time in the Marine Corps, I've heard much, much worse. But yeah, that was pretty much all I had as far as topics for the day. We're all kind of waiting on the ACC FSU stuff because that puts so many other things in place. I know there's cases upcoming this week. Perhaps here I'll leave you with kind of a funny one that I saw. I got a kick out of this because, oh goodness gracious, were people upset? SEC fans, Big 12 fans, everyone were upset to see SMU included. So this is going to be my submission for bad realignment take of the week, where suddenly SMU ends up in the SEC. The Tulane, it would have made more sense to me for Tulane and Georgia Tech to be in there because they were in the SEC a long time ago. At least you could make that conclusion. But holy goodness gracious, if the if SMU had to pay their way into the ACC, I don't even want to know what those oil barons are footing the bill for to get into the SEC. I'm sure they'd have to have some bad videotape of Greg Sankey doing something, I think, to get their way into the SEC. But I digress. That is certainly one of the more interesting realignment takes I have seen in recent history. Got here a DP question. How could the Pac-12 leadership screw up that conference so bad? Was it leadership or was it things out of leadership's control? Couple of things. The majority of it sits on their hiring of Larry Scott. So the buck stops with the presidents. The presidents and Larry Scott jointly, I would say, hold like 90% of the blame in my eyes, maybe 80. The unfortunate timing thing, which you can say it's their fault or not, is USC being down post Pete Carroll, Reggie Bush, and the Heisman and the championship being stripped away. That took a big hit because, just being honest, even as a Washington fan, the perception of the Pac-12 was always tied to USC and how well they were doing. If USC was perceived to be bad, people just said, oh, well, the Pac-12 is bad. Even if it wasn't true, people just said, oh, the Pac-12 is bad. And then where the teams hurt themselves is the Pac-12 bowl record and out of conference record was horrible for several years, which is why last season the Pac-12 did really well in the non-conference and decently well in the bowl games. Like Utah beat Florida in the non-conference. That was not happening in the decade prior. So the Pac-12 dug their own grave, and Larry Scott with the Pac-12 network, he kind of basically just built the coffin, and George Kliavkoff and the president's not taking that deal that went to the Big 12 eventually. That was the final nail, and it was done. So it's sad. I will always miss it. I'm a West Coast guy. I love the Pac-12 no matter what, but it did not have to happen that way. Almighty Finn, hit the like button, please, and subscribe to the show. There's shows all week. You have Moen After Dark. You have the guys on our normal Big 12 Mafia and College Football Mafia shows. Our huge Friday show where they get a whole panel of guys to basically discuss the thing of the week. And our members, check out our member videos. Wild U does awesome breakdowns. And you get the legal breakdowns from our FSU fan and lawyer extraordinaire, Doug Rohan. So all of that stuff coming, and it will keep coming. Thank you so much for everyone supporting the channel. Illini Ted is the consensus that in the area waiting the ACC drama or Wazoo OSU get antsy, something done. I threw this one out there a week or two ago. I'll share it with you if I can find it. I think that they're going to be left out in the cold. Basically, if the ACC loses 6 to 8 teams, that's their only window for joining. I don't think they're going to get into the Big 12, unfortunately, unless the Big 12 starts losing more teams like Kansas going to the SEC or Big 10. But that's years down the road, and they do not have that long to wait. So I cooked this up a week ago or so, and this is what I would do if I were them. Not that it can be done or should be done. This is what I would do. Take your core, Mountain West teams that draw decently well and generate fan base. Pluck what teams you can out of the ACC, and like a team like Tulsa has been down, but they are known to have a strong fan base. These are the teams that I based on good viewership, and this would be the super G5. Like, this team would be the best G5 basically every season in my mind. And they would be competing for that playoff spot every year. That's a big deal. If your conference is the one that's getting a playoff spot every year, no, you're not a power conference, but that's a carrot on the stick. That's big exposure. That's more money for your teams, and that's a huge incentive. So and also the reason I selected the teams I did, you could add a UTEP or whatever. You could argue specific teams, but all of these teams are in the Central, Mountain, or Pacific time zones. So that's just an example for the G5. Yeah, DP, I meant FSU and Clemson. Yeah, I kind of realized what you meant as I got into it there. Apologies. I just like showing my crazy maps of ideas. Oh, yeah, sorry. I already got to that one. But yeah, Wazoo and OSU get antsy. They need to make a super G5. If they can literally say, we are locking down that last playoff spot and the extra money that comes with it because we're going to assemble a super G5, that's got value. That's big time. So DP, I don't see ACC surviving once FSU and UNC leave. Interesting. You didn't include FSU, Clemson, and UNC. I see what you meant. Got confused there. Yeah, FSU and Clemson, obviously they're the big TV brands. FSU and Clemson, my terrible speaking, FSU and Clemson kill the value. UNC is like the linchpin for the rest of it, like Washington and Oregon were for the pack, the rest of the pack going away. UNC, because they've always been looked at as like the stronghold and leader of the ACC in a sense. If they're out, the ACC in its current form is done. So I'm absolutely right there with you, DP. We are crossing right here at an hour. Thank you so much. We had up to 40 people up there in chat and 34 right now. Thanks for sticking with me as I'm flying solo. I know Greg and the PATC probably had some awesome stuff. He's a great show. Like, I have no animus toward other shows, but I'm happy to be here 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific every Monday, bringing to you the Big West Mafia Show. And once again, thank you so much to all our subscribers. Please smash the like button, leave comments down below, and become a channel member for those extra videos. All down here has been the links to our Twitter handles. Check out the College Football Mafia Discord. That's where all of our people are mixing it up and chatting ball at all times of the day. And once again, from myself and my co-host who is not here at the Big West Mafia Show, thank you for being here, and see you next Monday.